Morning from Vietnam. My name is Lien. It is my great honor to be here to make a presentation for this conference. My research interest is e-learning and learner autonomy in EFL class in Vietnam. As you may know, learning autonomy has been one of the biggest interests to researchers, teachers, learners, and scholars, because they all agree that developing some degree of autonomy can help to secure effective learners. However, promoting learner self-control has been far from an easy task, as it depends on a number of factors, including educational policy, pedagogical approach, technological support, or psychosocial motivation. However, in my opinion, there are two determining factors which directly involved in the process. They are teachers and learner engagement. In other words, to develop learner self-regulated learning, we need to know how teachers and students perceive this subject matter, and then learn how to promote learner autonomy from teachers and learner perspectives. In Vietnam, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced schools and universities to close down and classes are delivered online. Such compulsory virtual learning is believed to exert certain impacts on both EFL teachers and learners, and of course have somehow affected learner autonomy. Therefore, this research is aimed at investigating learner autonomy in EFL class in Vietnam when mandatory e-learning is applied, and based on the research findings, some recommendations to motivate self-control learners are put forth. First of all, I would like to talk about some theoretical framework for what we use for our study. According to Howlett, learner autonomy is the ability to take charge of one's own learning. By this, it means learner would be well aware of their learning purpose, share understanding of learning goals, take initiative in planning and executing learning activities, regularly review their learning, and of course, evaluate their effectiveness. This opinion is shared by a number of other scholars, including Little, 1991, Dickinson, 1987, Littlewood, 1996, Newland, 1997, or Benson, 2001. When it comes to the questions why learner autonomy is important, we are especially interested in what Little, 1993, suggested. He said, making learner autonomous first means making the learning more efficient and effective, because learning process has become more personal and focused. And it also means making the learners more motivated. Of course, to develop learner autonomy, we need to know what exactly it is. According to Benson, autonomous learners know how to, first of all, control learning management, then control over learning strategy, and control over learning content. The first component refers to the cognitive behavior of students who are directly engaged in the process of planning, organizing, and assessing. The second component involves two main learning strategies, the cognitive and metacognitive ones. And the third component, the content control, is kind of controversial issue. As you know, it is not the learners who can always take control of the learning content. In the school setting, a number of stakeholders, including the school policy makers, education practitioners, teachers, or even businesses, can take charge of this subject matter. According to Oxford, 1990, learner autonomy is classified into four main paradigms: practicing, receiving and sending messages, analyzing and reasonings, and creating structure, input and output. Okay, we would like to move to, the relation between learner autonomy in an EFL class and how to promote learner autonomy in an EFL class. According to Oxford, 1990, language use and language learning are highly social practices which require interdependence from one language users and another's. And ASH 2010 emphasized the promotion of learner autonomy by providing circumstances, context for language learners, which make it more likely that they take charge of the whole or a part of the learning program. And of course, which is more likely to help rather than prevent learners from exercising their autonomy. As for how to promote learner autonomy in EFL class, Benson 2011 proposes 6 different approaches as what you can see on the screen: resource-based, technology-based, learner-based, class-based, classroom-based, curriculum-based, and teacher-based approaches. Leaderwood 1996 developed a more detailed framework for developing learner autonomy in EFL context. He means autonomy on the task level, autonomy on learning level, autonomy on personal level. And later on, he also suggests that fostering learner autonomy is to empower learner to be willing and capable to take over the responsibility of learning. This study used leader framework to examine 2 domains, including student willingness and student capability to take over responsibility of learning to get involved in EFL class. Well, and of course, there comes another question, that is the relation between e-learning and learner autonomy. According to Candice and Stern, Cohen, Orchkin, 2009, e-learning provides increased accessibility to information, therefore creating kind of literate, technologically literate workforce and meeting the need for long life self-directed. Benson proposed that e-learning can bring about both linguistic and non-linguistic input that helps to improve learners' language ability. And to promote virtual learning and autonomy, Benson proposed 3 main approaches: the technical, the psychological, and the political approach. However, you know, online learning environment sometimes poses great challenge for developing self-regulated capabilities of learners. The learners who are capable of self-control their learning will face, a number of difficulties in engaging in this process. And the engagement of learner is, of course, really important in yielding the good outcomes for academic performance. Therefore, in this study, we would like to examine teacher and student perspective on learner autonomy in EFL class in Vietnam, so that we can have some kind of suggestions for learners and teachers of my university and some nearby university. In order to conduct the research, 2 research questions are set forth. The first one is, what is teacher perspective on learner autonomy in EFL class? And the second one is, what is learner perspective on learner autonomy in EFL class 2? The research method selected for the study is exploratory survey research, because according to Kenlinger 1986, an exploratory, though does not have a fixed model, it is quite flexible and can be adapted throughout the process of researching, and it is capable of laying foundation for future studies and does not require any prior works. The research has been conducted with the involvement of 100 students and 20 teachers coming from 5 different universities in the north of Vietnam, 3 of which are in the city where the researcher resides, and 2 others are located in the nearby provinces. In all of the university, English is a compulsory subject, and it is assigned 15 credits totally. Graduate students are required to get at least B1 English proficiency level. Virtual lessons are made compulsory during the COVID-19 pandemic, and Zoom is the online platform in use. To collect data for analysis, the two survey questionnaires are designed and distributed. One is for teachers and the other is for students. There are 15 questions for each questionnaire, and these questions focus on two different domains. The first one is student willingness to get engaged in the lessons, and the second is their capability to self-control their learning process. In order to have insight into student engagement, the researcher focuses on the two main disciplines. The first one is student familiarity with a used platform, which is Zoom, and the second is student love to learn. In order to secure the validity of the test and the data collected, a questionnaire pilot test was conducted. And after that, for data analysis, an SPSS 2.0 is used. As you can see from the table number 1 and number 2, for this table, you can see to evaluate student willingness, we have 8 different questions, and to evaluate student capability, we have 7 questions. For the first one, we would like to look at how students familiar with the used platform and how much they love to learn. For the second part of the questionnaire, we would like to know how students know to learn online and whether they keep learning offline. Similarly, the questionnaire to investigate student perspective on learner autonomy is the same. However, there are some alterations made to tailor it to the student situation, with some questions justified and adapted. From the data collected and analyzed, we come up with some findings, and what you can see on these two tables. The first one is teacher perspective on learner autonomy. First of all, half of the teachers survey agree that students are willing to join their online classes. They know how to use Zoom with some specific function, such as having an audio, using chat, or sharing their lesson on the box, with means ranging from 3.65 to 3.7, and SD from 0.4 to 0.6. And that is what you can see on question 3, 4, and 6. Most noticeably, teachers all agree that their students often join Zoom meeting in time. That means virtual punctuality, as what you can see on question 1. However, statistics indicate that the sample teacher disagree that their students often use the reaction icons to communicate on Zoom, as what you can see on question 5, and especially they do not join in Zoom meeting with camera on. Question 2, we do know means is just 1.9 and SD is 0.7. And also they are not actively engaged in Q&A section during the virtual lessons. Turning to the survey on student capability to learn online from question 9 to question 15, it is clear that most of the teachers agree students can take responsibility over their learning process. They often contact with the instructors, understand the lectures, make use of the web-based material, fulfill the course objective. And that is what you can see from question 11, 12, and 13. The mean scores for these questions range from 3.1 to 4.1, and the SD is lower than 0.7. However, there's a point worth mentioning. It is most of the teachers disagree that their students work collaboratively. Question 9, only 2.6 mean and 0.5 SD. And they had the tendency to contact with the teachers. They didn't have the tendency to contact their teachers after online lessons. Those opinions diverge. Most teachers agree that their students basically fulfill the requirement for the upcoming online lesson. Now, I would like to turn to the results regarding student perspective on learner autonomy. As you can see from table 2, most of the students agree that they knew how to use technology, and they of course could make use of the platform. However, they disagree that they often use time to explore the function of Zoom. I mean the online, the use platform. Although students disagree that they are ready to join in Zoom, they come to a consensus that they love Q&A section, as what you can see in question 5. However, there's a surprising fact that they often found asleep and distracted while learning online, as what you can see on from question number 6 and number 7. Regarding student capability to take over the responsibility of their learning process, students agree that they often communicated with their teachers during online lesson. Moreover, students reported that they used the web-based materials, search for further information online, and most importantly, they agree that they could meet the lesson requirement, especially they could self-study after online lesson. However, if we look more closely into the details, we could find out some surprising fact that students themselves disagree that they love working with their peers. And of course, they did not contact them after lessons. They also did not have the habit of keeping in touch with the instructors after the online courses. Well, from the above findings, we would like to have some discussion. First of all, it is about teacher perspective on learner autonomy. We first have looked at teacher opinion about student interest in learning. According to them, their students are well aware of the virtual punctuality, and this somehow indicates certain degree of willingness. Such finding is understandable in the context that most schools in Vietnam have to be closed down due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and online lessons are made compulsory. Both teachers and students therefore need to get used to this change. What's more, most teachers believe that their students know how to use the given platform, and it may support their active participation in class. However, a question remains regarding why students do not have the cameras on during the online lessons. Of course, there are a number of reasons, but I suppose that may be because of virtual classroom regulation or student preference. If the school or the teacher do not require the student to do so, I don't think that the student want to show their faces or the messy surrounding to others. Or maybe because they feel shy. Referring back to question number 6 and number 7 in the survey for students, we could find out a puzzling fact that students often found asleep, and also they fell victim to virtual distraction during the lessons. And of course, their unwillingness to have the camera on may affect their peer and teacher interaction to some extent. Another remarkable point is that students did not like Q&A section. But in fact, Q&A is a key component for the active interaction in the class, even in traditional classroom or virtual classroom. The third problem is students are not eager to get involved in working with their peers. In fact, classroom collaboration indicates certain level of learner active participation. And active participation also means, to some extent, learner autonomy. The failure or ignorance to partake in group work or team building activity means learning and teaching quality may be adversely affected. The fourth problem is teachers do not think that the student contacted them very often after lessons. There's a disagreement between the teacher question, especially those who came from different institutions. This fact is due to the differences in teacher individual requirements. or the degree of attention they spend for students, or maybe that is because of school regulations. I would like to move on to the part of discussion regarding learner perspective and learner autonomy. From the findings, we all agree that students show certain degree of autonomous learning. Generally, they agree that they could understand the lectures, fulfill the course objective, prepare for upcoming lessons, make use of online resources, and self-monitor their learning. However, there are some points worth consideration. The first examined indicator for the attitude is their familiarity with Zoom, the platform in use, and the second is their preference for e-learning. In fact, the student did not spend time exploring Zoom. That means they, of course, cannot make full use of the app. And of course, it may affect to some extent the learning process and the interaction in the class. The student also found a slave and were easily distracted by other, the surrounding and especially the virtual apps. It may mean that they were not really interested in their virtual lessons, and of course they cannot concentrate. They could not concentrate on their learning and their lessons too. Another concern is the difference between teacher and student opinion regarding student reaction toward Q&A section. As you may remember, teacher believed that their student was not keen on Q&A section, but from the student questionnaires, they said that they were interested in Q&A section. So this kind of paradox may affect the interaction between teacher and student in a class. Also, this fact reveals a kind of concern because, as you may know, Bloom taxonomy categorized cognitive level into 6 domains, and the application of question or Q&A section is more likely to support teacher to realize their student cognitive ability. For example, if you still remember, there are 6 different ranks in that kind of taxonomy, and low rank question can elicit responses in knowledge, comprehension, application domains, while high rank question can evoke ability in analysis, synthesis, evaluation domains. And of course, it helps to encourage and provoke student critical thinking. The misassumption of teacher and student about this section, the Q&A part, of course, may partly affect their interaction and of course, affect their learning and teaching quality. Turning to student capability to take control of their e-learning. There first a paradox that a majority of students said they were eager to get engaged in the lesson, but in fact, they did not want to cooperate with peers. In other words, they showed the willingness, but did very little to prove that. These findings coincide with those taken from the questionnaire for teachers, which stated that students did not like working with their peers. And turning to after class interaction, students involved in the survey claimed that they had no tendency to keep in touch with their teachers after lessons. And this can be understood either by examining classroom regulation or teacher support scheme, or maybe by acknowledging students had developed certain degree of autonomy, and as the result, they no longer needed their teacher after class support. All in all, this study reveals certain findings about student willingness and capability to take responsibility over the learning process. In other words, they show certain degree of autonomy. Generally, students, of course, show certain degree of autonomy. However, there's something worrying that I could figure out from my study. The students are not quite willing to engage in the class. That can be, seen by both students' poor habit of working with their technological apps and the bad manner of sleeping and neglecting their lectures. Also, that can be further explained by their keenness to perform in a collaborative working and Q&A section, because they said they did not quite enjoy that activity in the class. And of course, they also did not like working further with their teachers and their peers after the class. From this fact, I would like to suggest to make some recommendations to improve learner autonomy in virtual EFL class in Vietnam. And that is the combination of multiple approach. The first one is political one, the second one is technical approach, and the next one is pedagogical approach. And the most important approach, I think, is psychological approach. I mean, student is the center of this process, and they should be willing to take change, and of course, to get involved in the learning process. And only when our students are well aware of what they need to do and what they need in the class, the virtual class, then the learner autonomy can be, maximized. Because this research is just conducted as a kind of exploratory survey research with the involvement of 120 students, 20 participants. So there's some more that we can do in the future. First of all, the specific reason justifying the collected opinion should be examined. Further investigation can be conducted regarding other factors governing learner autonomy, such as psychological motivation, community support, cognitive problem-solving skills. It is not only, what we call student willingness and their capability to self-study. The differences in administrative and managerial bodies, which may have, certain impact on reliability and validity of the study result, should be taken into consideration. And more research can be implemented exploring the political and pedagogical impacts on learner autonomy. That is what I would like to share with you, my research findings from my own context, from the context of Vietnam now, when people have to, deliver their classes online. And I hope that it can somehow contribute to their their researching process, and you can further study from what I have found out. Thank you very much for your listening, and goodbye.